Welcome back to the Kingsway Podcast.
Welcome.
I waited till Ryan was drinking his coffee to do that.
I was going to go, welcome back to the Kingsway Podcast. Welcome.
Well, we're glad you're here, and episode 199.
Yep. We are putting this out, I think, Thursday the 21st or 2nd or something of November. But what we really hope for this episode, if you're listening right now and you're not currently driving to where you're going to spend Thanksgiving, we give you permission to stop and listen at that point. This is the I'm driving to my family for Thanksgiving podcast episode.
That's so true. One of the things I feel like every year I kind of bump up against, and I think it's through just sitting with people and doing like some pastoral care and counseling and mentoring and just being a friend and watching kind of the holidays be almost hijacked sometimes. And then even just how the intensity of sometimes relationships can, over the course of time, can just be some things that kind of add up or kind of become like burdenous, or they kind of just kind of get stored up. And then the holidays is like the place where you have to like grit your teeth and put a smile mask on.
It's kind of, for some families in some situations, it's grudges.
Yeah.
I remember when you did that thing and I'll never forgive you. For some families and situations, it is, I know how you are, like putting you in a box of a personality. Maybe it was actually who you are at 16 or 9 years old or whatever. But like, hey, I'm 30 now. Like, I have a job. I'm not still that person from 20 years ago. Kind of in the grudge camp, but kind of not. Just like I'm holding you to who you were or who I thought you were 20 years ago.
And I think there's like levels of this. So, you know, you've read the title. You've probably got an idea. It's just like navigating difficult or challenging relationships around the holidays and trying to speak some maybe some life and some hope, and then kind of give some pointers. And then also just admit that for most of us, there are just some difficult things that we often have to navigate. And I think even the best families still have moments where it can just be challenging to put a bunch of people that love each other and truly sometimes even want to love each other and get along, but haven't spent as much time together or forced into kind of some difficult, stressful situations, maybe lots of kids or lack of room or strong personalities, clashing views or values. And so, you know, my hope is that as you're listening to this, that it helps you navigate both sides of it. Because let's be honest, like sometimes the holidays are difficult. We were just talking about this, and North Point Community Church is doing like a very specific thing about this in December. But sometimes the holidays are difficult because someone's not there. And so like a divorce, a loss of a parent or a grandparent, it could be even as devastating as a loss of a nephew or a niece or, you know, God forbid, a child. And so the thought process around how the holidays can be navigated just in that sense can be difficult. Then you can have, like we were talking about, a conflict that's occurred over the course of the last year, whether it be political, financial, relational, whether it be, you know, even a moral failure or something that's happened or occurred, an addiction, a struggle that's even ongoing. And it really can be difficult. You know, those are the extremes. I think the ones that we more relate to are, you know, the words that certain people would choose to use, the lack of respect or boundaries, maybe even jealousy, or like even people speaking, you know, certain ways or with certain language that maybe you don't speak with around your kids, and they choose to use that language around your kids, and now you're trying to figure out how to, you know, how do you teach your kids that some people use different words and you don't use those words? It can be topics or things that they choose to talk about. And it all ranges around, too, what they think the holidays are for. And you're trying to maybe navigate it in a way of like bringing value to the holidays and bringing what you see as like the benefits. And for them, it could be a completely set of different things or wins, you know, around. And so I guess I want to start there by saying like, and mom and dad, if you're listening to this, or you know, my brother and sister, this is not anything like that.
Close your ears.
Close your no. But I do want to talk about like, you know, what are some of the things that, you know, you've experienced, because you've been married 7 years, 7 years. And, you know,
I think
there's a big shift when all of a sudden you get married and now the holidays become your family, her family, your
Yep.
family, your family, you and her, what are some of the things that you've had to navigate or you think through, or maybe you've seen in others that you're like, gosh, this does make this difficult?
Yeah. There's a range of things. Sharon and I's families are super different, and we love both of our families, but it's weird. It's like being an ambassador and then coming back to your home country.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't remember this many Starbucks. I don't remember whatever. Like, totally stuff that's okay, but you realize, man, we've been living in different worlds. And so when we visit her side of the family, it's all her parents and her sister and brother-in-law all work at the same place.
Yeah.
And they all know
And
the
they're
same
around
people.
each other all the time.
And they live within a mile of each other.
Yep.
And so it's like filling us in on stories about people we don't know and honestly don't care that much about. Not that we want those people to not do well, but like I have no context for who that is or why they're important or whatever. And so like it's like we have to be integrated into their world, less questions and concern and interest in our world.
Yeah.
So the thing that we have to do to be healthy and to survive through that is like interject some of our world when we can and when it's not inappropriate, but also just kind of put ourselves on the back burner and be like, I don't know that telling them about us is the way they're going to feel loved and appreciated the most. With my family, things have just gotten a lot easier. I feel like it used to be a little harder.
Yeah.
When my grandparents would be around, because my parents are very even keel and go with the flow, and my grandparents are pretty even keel.
Yeah.
But when it comes to politics or religion or whatever, which I would generally fall vaguely on the side that they do, but less militantly. Like I remember a big fight we had one time during a holiday was coming back from church, and my mom has made a good lunch, and my grandpa wants to turn on Fox News. And she's like, can we just have a quiet dinner? And these two people who are like so patient and kind all the time just like start shouting at each other. And I'm like, what is this? Why? Why did you stop being yourselves for the sake of, it's, and one of the reasons back and forth, especially for my grandpa, was like, well, what if something happens? I don't know. You'll find out about it in an
10
hour.
minutes. Yeah.
Can you not sacrifice an hour for, anyway, so there's always like conflicting priorities no matter which family you're a part of. But yeah, I think like generally it's going to be even easier this year. And
I think each year is different. I'm glad you're pointing that out. Like not everybody I know is like staring down a difficult situation. In fact, I hope most people that are listening to this, they maybe aren't listening to it for themselves, but maybe it's somebody that they know that has this struggle. And so they're trying to help them navigate it as much as maybe them. And my family, particularly on both sides, there's not really a whole lot most of the time that goes on that causes major friction.
Which now most of you live within 30 minutes of each other.
There's a large portion of my family that I get along with very well. My immediately family, my sister and my mom and dad live in the same town as I do. So that's been a new thing. And even my brother, he used to live in New York City. Now he lives in Omaha. The opportunity to go see him is even, it's an easier idea. I think where I run into with the holidays, because personally, just being a little vulnerable, I stink at being in large groups that I don't particularly enjoy. And I can be surrounded by people I love and even people that I enjoy one-on-one or two-on-one. Yeah. And for whatever reason, you get a certain amount of people in a certain proximity. It's like I get anxious and I kind of like want to run. It's like, I don't know what it is. I like shut down. And I've had to kind of learn what that is because it feels very true to who I am, but also like a thing that I have to maybe just grow in.
Yep.
And so one of the things I've been working on, and I heard it, and then I been fleshing it out. I'm actually going to teach it at a Bible study tomorrow. Was this idea that the faster and more stressed and more anxiety you have in your life, the more selfish you are.
Yeah.
And it's a natural thing that occurs in the body where you don't want to be being attacked by a bear and my body worrying about you.
Yeah.
Like I can't be like thinking about like your body's like, hey, move. You don't want to get eaten. Like, and so you naturally kind of start to think about it. The problem is when you live or you have an environment or you're constantly in a place of stress, you become more selfish. Like, and you're thinking about your own needs, your own, ways to thrive rather than from a place of peace and slowing down and contentment. There's an opportunity to look around and think about others. And I found that the more anxious I get, the more I do not enjoy the holidays. But the more I let the holidays just be what they are and at peace, the more I settle into those environments and I actually see the opportunities rather than what's missing or what's frustrating or what's not working.
Yeah.
Dallas Willard has a famous quote that we've talked about 1,000 times, but that's where this concept comes from: is enemy is or hurry is the enemy of your soul. And it's this idea that like hurry in some ways affects the soul in a negative way. Like Jesus was never in a hurry. And I find that if you're going to navigate difficult relationships and you're going to have to walk into hard things, fighting hard to settle your soul and to come in with peace and to not let anxiety rule and to not be in an anxious hurry, really helps you kind of be more confident, settle in, and be a little selfless and not be so affected by everything around you, just at an anatomical, like self-preservation level, you would be. And that's something that you can control, to a certain level when you come into those environments where all of a sudden you're like, all right, have I done the work to prepare myself to go into these environments, or am I dependent on how everybody else talks, how everybody else acts, how everybody else is? And if that environment is so bad, then I'm, rather than bringing that into that environment to plan. And I think that's something that I've started to do that's helpful in my own soul. And it's something that feel like it's kind of prep work for me.
Yeah. A way you can really apply this to the holidays that we're talking about, Thanksgiving, and then you leave for 1 month and come back for Christmas for a lot of us. The best way to think about it and to apply that is to stop thinking about holidays as a vacation and start thinking about them as a mission field.
Yeah.
It's not a time to drop your shoulders and lose all responsibility. It's a time to actually add responsibility and prep yourself for an extended time of like hard work.
Yeah.
And the reason I say this, like the whole, there's a really good book. I can't remember if it's a Skye Jethani, like only like ebook or something, but when churches became cruise ships or how churches became cruise ships. I think it's him. Maybe it's somebody else. And it's talking about like how cruise ships have like invested so much of their structure and their language. They've like modeled it around this word pamper. And I think maybe you've talked about this before even, that like pampering is their goal to where you have no responsibilities. All your needs are met. You don't have to think for yourself and you can be a child again, as in no responsibilities, not as in like curious or whatever. So it's like, I just want to lose all responsibilities for a week. And if you went on a cruise ship and all of a sudden they were like, are you going to do your dishes?
Yeah.
You'd be like, what?
Yeah.
Why? What do I pay you for? But so many of us are going to walk into Thanksgiving or Christmas and seeing family like that and sort of expect that like this should be an easier time than normal.
Yeah.
Well, actually, unless you've been talking to these people regularly, all of them, you're going to be picking back up relationships you haven't like encountered in 11 months or longer.
And I think where this comes from me is Matthew 6:26-36, where Jesus talks about anxiety and worry. And it's in the Sermon on the Mount. And one of the things he talks about is like your anxiety often is attached to what you think brings peace.
Yeah.
And what you think brings hope and what you think is ultimately going to lead to your prosperity or success, or honestly, just your contentment. And what he basically says is like the birds and the flowers, they're content. They do their things, but they're good. And like what leads to contentment is seeking his kingdom first.
Yeah.
It's like putting his priorities, his things first. And then after that, the peace is promised. And I think what I ultimately want is the environment to provide the peace.
Yeah.
and the environment to be the thing that controls my attitude so I don't have to worry. And that is ultimately just me putting faith in the world or my circumstances rather than trusting that God can bring peace even when there's not peace around me. And that goes along with the second thing that I was going to mention, which also is found in there, is this concept of, are you listening to what previously has occurred in your brain more than you are speaking what you'd like to see happen in the future? And I've found that a lot of people go into these environments playing the reels of what has occurred before, or what they're afraid of, or what they've seen, or what, and all their anxieties and worries just play nonstop. And what this guy was preaching and teaching was, you should be speaking life over you way more than you should be listening to your failures and regrets. You should be speaking life over yourself, that it comes from God, how he views you, how he sees this situation, how hope could be found moving forward, way more than you should be listening to these regrets, these frustrations, these hurts from before. And he uses this illustration: no car will ever have a larger rear view mirror than windshield. And for whatever reason, people go into the holidays with a massive rear view mirror and this teeny little view of what the future could look like.
Yeah.
And I just feel like as you're navigating these relationships, if your rear view mirror gets too big, there's no hope. You're just going to hit more and more things and cause more and more problems. Yeah. Do you feel that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and sometimes it's sort of thrust upon us. Like I was saying before, certain members of our family just assume that we haven't changed since age 8. Well, I thought you hated broccoli. Well, I'm an adult. Something's changed. I don't remember you ever eating a salad.
Example, but no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But like, sometimes that's just thrust upon us. Like, oh, you're always late to stuff. Well, I've had a job for a long time. Like, I'm fine now.
Yep.
I've adjusted.
Oh my gosh.
So sometimes it's that kind of stuff. And it's like, but sometimes it's like, well, I know you're a liar. What if I've done a lot of work to not be that way anymore and to create trusting relationships around me? Or like you're talking about, like scandalous things that people have tried to overcome. I know we both, at least I did, listen to a podcast with Carl Lentz recently talking about like what he did over the past couple of years. And it wasn't like, I went through a program for 12 weeks and now I'm not somebody who cheated on his wife. Carl Lentz was a Hillsong pastor in New York
City.
And he had a big public
moral
failure and cheated on his wife for a prolonged amount of time. And it came out. And then he just kind of like went dark. Him and his family just like went undercover and nobody heard from them for at least 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And then maybe and his wife did a little bit of an interview for an HBO thing on Hillsong, and then nothing else. And then like 8 or 10 months after that, started doing their own podcast and talking about it. And pretty much what he said is, I realized when all that was falling apart, I could reach and try to save one thing. And it was either my ministry or my family. So I gave up my ministry and hid and just tried to hold on to my family as hard as I could and apologize and work back from the bottom and like build trust again. And it wasn't all roses and optimism. Like
hard work.
He said his daughter had a mental health episode and was in an institution. And then that news came out.
Yep.
And so he called her wanting to be the first person to tell her. And she's like, thanks for telling me. I don't know if I forgive you and I don't know if I ever will. And he said, that was one of the toughest moments of my life. But in a weird way, that was a moment where God was taking care of us because she was in an institution surrounded by therapists. Like that's the best place to get that news.
Yeah.
And so like they're slowly coming back to like being healthy and being close again. And him and his wife are doing good. And so like those moments, imagine if like for the rest of us, we hear about him. We don't hear from him in 2 years. And he comes back and he's like, I'm all better. You're like, but the last time I heard about you, which was 2 years ago, you weren't all better. So how dare you? Like nobody can we haven't, in the same way that the holidays put 11 months between us.
Yeah.
We haven't been with each other. We don't know.
Yes.
And you only get a glimpse and then you leave and then you do it in a year.
And that's a great transition into what I think often is the greatest creator of tension around the holidays is I think uncommunicated or I would say overestimated or immature or poor expectations.
Yes.
And so the idea that most of the time causes conflict when, especially even in my family, that I feel like we handle some of this decently well.
Yeah.
And that's trial and error. My wife and I have been married, a lot longer than you guys. And so 17 years is there's just more opportunity. But what I found to be some of the most difficult things was when you start blending houses, the traditions and the things that everybody wants to do and who gets to go here and when do we meet here and like who's going to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And then the way that some people can feel like they're being pushed down or neglected and other people feel like they're getting the more like the best of the holiday or their traditions are getting elevated.
Yeah.
And I also think it's like, how much are we going to be together? When are we going to eat meals together? Are we going to go out? Are we going to stay in? Ryan is having an allergy attack during this podcast.
Goodbye, everybody. This will be my last episode.
Sneeze 17, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
Are you going to live?
No. Let's keep going.
So the thought, I think, is what can you do as someone that's trying to come in with, I think the desire and your goal of that is a very important indicator of whether or not the holidays may be a success or not a success. And I like what you said earlier of like, not necessarily always mission field, but like coming in, surrendering your expectations.
Yeah.
And allowing this to be something that it doesn't have to go A, B, and C for it to be good.
Yeah. It's what I meant by mission field is it's your job to show up to Thanksgiving, show up to Christmas and love people. It's not your job to show up there and be loved because you can't control that.
Yep.
But actually your best bet of being loved is to turn that expectation around and love other people.
Absolutely.
So if you think that there's tension between you and your brother or your mom or whoever else, address that and proactively love them. This is the one time that I would say do a preemptive strike like George Bush. I'm kidding. That's not what you should say at Thanksgiving. But you should preemptive strike love. You should love them before they love you when you show up.
Yeah.
Start off with hugs and start off with questions about them. And that will probably lead to, or at least a better chance of like you getting what you want out of people.
Yep.
Not that that's the goal necessarily, but like that's why it's a mission field.
You're
have
there
to
less
do that.
regrets personally, even if people don't respond or it doesn't meet what you would hope. Everybody kind of has in their mind like the Christmas like expectation of like we're all going to sit around a giant piece of meat or some bird that's been, or some hunk of ham, and there's going to be all these
roasted goose
decorations, and everybody's going to be sitting calmly in their best attire, and everybody's going to say something they are grateful for, and then we're all going to eat quietly and discuss the appropriate things and show manners, and it's just like, okay, like I mean, I would hope that some form of those things takes place. But in some ways, like you said, you can't control all that.
Yeah.
And you may get that and lose everything by demanding that.
Yeah.
And it may look like it's a successful, but that actually may be not the way to the best success in the sense of how to build the relationships and make it actually something that you remember and love.
Yeah. This is going to be a really depressing way to talk about it, but
I'm excited.
Holidays are, if you and your family live pretty far apart, which we're in Mount Vernon, I feel like Mount Vernon and the surrounding area is typically a place that more people than not stick around rather than leave. Generally a little true. Not always.
Not always, but I would agree with you that most people have family close.
Yeah. So this may not apply to some of those kind of people as well, but like these are the few instances that you get to in person interact with people maybe who you didn't choose to love, but who were chosen for you to love. These family you didn't pick your own family.
Yep.
But if any one of those, if any one of those people were to pass away before the next Thanksgiving or the next Christmas, would you be proud and thankful of how this one went, or would you not be? And there's part of that that's their fault. Like you can't control how they're going to act. but you can control how proud you are of your own actions by what actions you choose. So like, again, that's why I say like, don't treat this like a time for them to see how great you're doing and for them to like love you and respect you the way you always hope they would. Maybe they will and maybe they won't. But this is a time for you to do that for them. If that's what you want, almost certainly that's what they want.
Yeah. And I think, to kind of put a bow on this in some little way, and maybe this will be something we can talk about for a few minutes, but something that I don't see, maybe I haven't even talked about it enough and I should talk about it more, but kind of the linchpin for me to change how these interactions have felt is and we've been talking about prayer so much at Kingsway. I don't know why this is something more that we run to, but I get really honest with God about tension that I feel with people that maybe I didn't pick them, but I really love them. You know what I mean? Like I genuinely really love them. And situations can be complex in how we interact with each other, stages of life, financial differences, just the tensions of work and time off and space to stay and schedules. And we, like you said, because we only have so much time together, those little complexities and logistics can portray a message that doesn't always accurately describe how we really love each other, because it puts these things in place that it makes it feel like, well, you didn't prioritize me, or we don't really relate anymore, or you don't really understand me, or you don't really get what my life and what I'm going through right now. And you're speaking like you understand how hard things are, or you don't even see what you're doing. And we say all these things, and I didn't realize how much I just didn't invite God's wisdom into some of those to help me see how I'm blind sometimes to understanding what's really going on. And I need his wisdom to help navigate that. And it's not always just me just gritting my teeth and getting through it. It actually sometimes, and I've found that when I do this and surrender a relationship or a part of some tension inside family, what I've found is that God's like, I deal with that with you all the time. He's like, welcome. Like,
I don't have to wait 11 months.
Family of God is complex, and he's like, I deal with you. Like you're your own problem. And so practically what this would look like is, the name of the person or the relationships in your family that maybe it's not even tension with you. Maybe it's tension between two other people that
and you just don't like that.
They're just going to be forced to be around them, but just praying, God, help me see how I could, how I could be loving, or how I could be giving or serving, how I could come in with the right attitude that would be a peacemaker.
Yeah.
And I've found that if I'm praying that, it's not, God, just help him get along. Like that's not the prayer. Like the prayer is like, I want to thrive. I want this to be a loving interaction where we feel connected and people leave feeling like we're family. Like we're not just forced to hang out. And the amount of times that I felt like the blessing has not been that everything went well. The blessing is that everybody truly felt like they loved each other. And not that it works every single time, but I've found that it works wonders in my own heart, even navigating some of it.
Also, the short amount of time adds a lot of pressure. I feel like I noticed this with you guys and your parents.
Yep.
That like when they would come down for Thanksgiving or for Christmas, it's high pressure. It's go, go, go. It's whatever. And that's just like, that's the way your parents are. That's the way my wife's parents are. They have a hard time sitting down and not doing anything.
Yep.
But it was like, go, go, go. And we got to do these events. And we got to do whatever.
Yep.
But when they moved around, it was like they have their own lives. They have their own friends.
100%.
You can hang out for a dinner and then go back home.
And it was it was the level of kids too. When the kids are little, like, oh God, everything's so hard.
That's part of the pressure. But I just want you, whoever's listening to it, and I'm going to re-listen to this and do this for myself at our 2 Thanksgivings, is when you feel tension between you and somebody else, and you're, sorry, I'm so nasally.
He's
right
not
now.
Crying. He's
just allergy-y. When you feel like somebody's rude or somebody's inconsiderate or somebody's whatever, ask yourself why they're that way. Why is the dad of this family rude? Is it because they hate me? Or is it because they really want to go work on that woodworking project with one of the grandkids because that's where they made their best memories. And they feel like they're going to miss out, and that grandkid's going to miss out on the best thing they ever experienced, the grandpa. Or I want nicer, more recent pictures at my funeral of us being happy together. And I'm afraid if we don't get this picture after dinner, people are going to leave and whatever. And so because they forced the picture, everybody's angry and tired and grouchy and whatever.
Man, this feels too close to home.
There's always probably a good reason that somebody's acting in a way that is resulting in you feeling bad or tension or whatever. They probably have a good heartfelt reason. Maybe it's, I'm tired of people not respecting me. I'm getting older. Responsibilities are being taken away from me. I'm retired, so nobody depends on me anymore. My kids are out of the house. At least if I can have some wise thing about the government to say, they'll be like, whoa, he's still got it. And they keep not thinking that I got it. So I got to keep spitting facts at them that I learned from the Daily Wire or whatever. Sorry to just keep quoting or referencing. Not that any of these are bad, but like I have to be forceful to show that I know what I'm talking about and that I deserve to stick around. That I'm not like fading away currently.
And it is hard to connect when you haven't been together for a long time. Like you said, like it sometimes feels like you come back together and you pick right back up where you left off. And other times it feels like you're kind of like a plane coming in and you're like half land, and then you take back off and you're trying to get on the ground and you can't. You're like, when do we actually get to land this conversation? And then you leave, you know? And as you were speaking, I just kept thinking like, there just needs to be like, if you're looking for things that you can actively do as you're going into these moments with family and you're feeling tension or you're just wanting there to not be tension and you know there's the potential of it.
Potential.
New word. I think asking God to just clothe you with the fruits of the Spirit and to remind yourself that the fruits of the Spirit are meant to be lived out in community. They are not for individuals, they're for community. And so you can provide that fruit for the environments that you're in, but it only comes out of your heart from the Holy Spirit's work. And so this isn't something that you harvest without asking, planting the seed, and nurturing and allowing God to do the work in you. And you can start that now in prep work of like, all right, it's coming up. Here's the plan, but when that plan, you know, as Patton says, everybody has a plan until the battle starts, and then all plans go out the window until they meet the enemy, and then plans are out the window. And I think family is the same way. Everybody has a plan until the family's all there, and then the plan's out the window. But I think if you can, you know, kind of like cover yourself in this idea and like allow God to have His space. And I think removing your needs, your desires, the first thing you want, as the expectations need to be placed that God is in charge. God is the one that brings this. God, what do you want out of these encounters? What would be best honoring for you? And like, how would honoring you help our family? And like, what would that look like for you? And that doesn't mean that you like do a massive Devo or like make everybody memorize a Bible verse or like, I'm not trying to do that. I mean like your attitude, your love, your selfless acts can do that without it necessarily needing to be like a massive overall. Because a lot of families too, we don't know where they're at spiritually. Sometimes we're interacting with families that aren't all going to church and all got their lives together. And that's part of the problem is it's like you're living completely separate lives and then you're slamming your lives together for 2 or 3 days. And navigating that takes a lot of patience, a lot of selflessness, gentleness and kindness, and self-control. Like, oh my gosh, there's so many times, right, where you're just like, I just want to blow up and run. Like, I don't want to be, like I said, like my natural response is like, I just want to be here. You know, like I'm nervous, and sticking it out and trusting is a huge part. I
don't know why this is sticking out to me, but the kind of the Old Testament version of the fruit of the Spirit is usually almost always attributed to God. But it's, the Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. That's repeated at all these highly tense times. So I'm pretty sure it's repeated in Exodus. They do the golden calf thing after God delivers them from Egypt. They're like, yep, we'll just worship somebody else. And God's like, what the boop? And then he's about to destroy them. And Moses has to like mediate and be like, you don't want to save these people and then destroy them. What will those other nations think? Such a weird passage. Why is he so gaslighting? Anyway, but then the Lord relents. He decides not to. And he says, this is why I am the Lord your God, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. He says that a handful of other times at really key moments. And then one of my favorite times is in the end of Jonah, where it's quoted from Jonah about God in an angry way. I knew you wouldn't destroy these wicked people. I knew that you are gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. So if that's a repeated description of God, not just one time, but repeated word for word, or at least one time in Jonah, grammatically, contextually correct, but word for word, that's what godliness looks like.
Yeah.
So if you want to be like God, if you want to make God proud, do that thing. Doesn't mean never angry. If like a person in your family open face slaps another person in your family, it's probably a pretty good time to get angry. Or at least step in quickly. But like slow to anger, abounding in steadfast, unshaking, unchanging love.
Yeah.
Gracious, compassionate, believing the best. That's a good thing to be.
Yeah, it's absolute. John Mark Comer's new book, God Has a Name. That's one of the things he talks about is that description, gracious and compassionate. He says that is like one of the top descriptions of who God is. And then he quotes, which I quote all the time, A.W. Tozer's, what you think of when you think of God is the most important thing about you. So do you think God is gracious and compassionate? And if that's what God is like, well, you're made in his image. And so if you're made in his image, you're drawn. You should be drawn to be gracious and compassionate. And that's exactly which I hope maybe that's the prayer. Maybe that's the prayer that we are going to this, God, make me gracious and compassionate, abounding in steadfast love. Like maybe that's what you need to just help me be that and be true to that. Wherever you're at on this journey with your family and whether things blew up and they're not coming back together and whether somebody's not going to show up to the meal or someone's holding out and maybe your families are split because of divorce or someone else's choices. Whatever you're at, I pray that maybe you would take this as a heart chance to pray over your family and to desire to invite God in to see if there's some restoration that could take place. And maybe you're an instrument of that, or maybe you're just an instigator of that. But maybe you're also just a peace fighter in the background, that you're just allowing God to use you in any way that he sees fit. Yeah.
Work for people's good.
Yep.
If somebody's not showing up, still alive, but not showing up, message them and tell them you miss them and say, like, remember this time that blah, blah, blah. It was a great time. Miss you. Like extend that branch of steadfast, unshaking love, not shaken by the fact that they didn't show up. Or they're not planning on showing up.
And and that's gracious and compassionate. That's not ignoring what they did. It's offering grace, knowing what they did. And it doesn't let them off the hook. God is the ultimate judge. There is justice in the world because we have God as our judge. But our job is to extend grace until that judgment takes place. Yeah. Just moving forward, I hope that this is an encouragement to you, remind you, don't make your rearview mirror larger than your windshield.
Yes.
Right. Don't do that. Remind yourself over and over and over again, if I am anxious and stressed and hurried, I'm probably acting selfish if I'm not careful. So I need to slow my heart rate down. I need to let the peace of God come in so that selfless love is able to get out and actually occur. And do whatever you need to do to prepare your heart for that and be ready to be selfless and steadfast. And be compassionate and gracious. And I hope that this is just an amazing holiday season for you. I really do. Anxious to hear your stories and excited to hear them. Maybe leave a comment or shoot a message that how well things went. And wherever you're at, I hope that you understand that you are more loved than you probably ever dare hoped. Even as broken as you feel, God loves you more. I read this morning that the forgiveness you're asking for has already been given.
Yeah.
So just trust in God's love and let that gratitude flow out of you to the people around you this holiday season. So,
this has been episode 199. The next episode you see from us will be 200. and we're going to party it up.
We're going to have a good time. So hopefully when you see that pop up, I hope you take advantage of it because it'd be a fun one to watch or even introduce other people to. And we're excited for the next 100.
Yep.
And we'll talk about that then. Hey, if you like this episode or want to pass it on, hit the subscribe button, share it with a friend, maybe leave us a good rating on a podcast apps. And as always,
if you want to donate to my Next Fund, I have a GoFundMe.
That's so awesome. Hey, thanks so much for listening and have a great and glorious day in the Lord. We'll see you next time.
See ya.